Thank you for your
having
time.
us.
Thank you. And our final presentation is on the Te Whau pathway, and I'd like to welcome Tony Miguel and team. Warm welcome. And I'll get you to do the introductions, Tony. Thank you.
There we go. Failed the first test. Yes, kia ora and thank you for your time. I'd just like to introduce myself, Tony Miguel, Chair of the Whau Coastal Walkway Environmental Trust, and Dai Rabindov, and Gilbert Breaky, who is a Deputy Chairperson. Also, just want to acknowledge the support from Council staff, Mace Ward, who's our sponsor, Martin and Jill, and also Craig McElroy and Gail Ogilvie and Barry Potter, who've been very supportive of the project to date. Certainly without their support, we wouldn't be able to be where we are today. So just really wanted to give you a quick update where we are at, and also talk to you about our request for funding and the proposal to kick off an environmental program. So just by the way of introduction, I think I came to this committee about 2 years ago, but as for you, I'm not familiar with the project. Essentially, it's a link from the Manukau to the Waitemata Harbour, following the portage. It builds on the existing cycleway along Portage Road. It connects the Henderson and Massey local wards and the Whau local wards and 3 electorates, and essentially it's a shared path for pedestrians and cyclists. Here's a proposed staging, obviously subject to funding. We haven't got any long-term funding secured for the project. We have secured approximately 6 million to date from council and 2 million from outside sources. The proposal is to complete the stages. One of the issues we have at the moment is we have sections completed, but they're not linked. So it is kind of a bit meaningless without the sections being completed. Ideally, aiming to get it finished by 2024, subject to funding. And here's some of the key indicators. So it's 15 kilometres long. It's connected to 23 schools, so we started to engage the schools in the project, mainly the Kelston hub. There's about 7,000 students. It connects 30 parks, so it's quite a unique opportunity for council to provide a connector in the park network. About 6.5 kilometres of the boardwalk are out in the coastal environment, and it's nearly 100,000 residents. This is a 2005 figure, so with the rate of growth in New Zealand, I'm sure it's grown since then. I just want to acknowledge our partners. So, firstly, Council, Auckland Transport, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, Te Kauramaki, and the Henderson and Whau local boards. So here's our objective. So this is more than just building a bit of concrete or a bit of boardwalk. The objectives are firstly to facilitate and build a shared walking and cycling path from Greenway to Te Aratu, to provide connections with the regional walking and cycling network. In the middle of the network is a connection to the New Zealand Transport Interchange, and also connection to the proposed New Zealand to Avondale path along the railway line, and a connection to the Northwestern Shared Path. And also there's talk of a proposed Te Aratu Transport Interchange near the Te Aratu motorway interchange, so it'll provide a connector to that. To provide a more safe and more convenient route for cycling and commuting. So the studies show that for those 30-odd schools, the 23 schools, sorry, most of them could be accessed by the path by about 1 to 2 kilometres. And quite interestingly, a very safe connection into Avondale. The next objective is to connect communities, promote health and recreation, to increase the levels of walking and cycling, and reduce car trips. Very importantly, to provide access to the Whau River. So one of those strategies has been to build a pontoon, which is originally designed for Wakama launching, but it's actually proved very successful with swimmers. And the bit that we're about to launch now is improving the natural environment, integrated aquatic and terrestrial environment, and very important to share and celebrate the Whau history. And if you look, it's interesting, if you look at this photo here, if I can use the pointer. The photo in the bottom is from 1930, and you can see how different the river was. Most of that water now has disappeared, it's been taken over by the mangroves, but it actually, the caption says, celebrate the start of the 1930 boating season. So quite a big history of boating in the area, and we certainly think that's appropriate to celebrate that, as well as the Maori heritage. So the budget, the project cost is about 64 million with 30% contingency. Possible funding could be by NCTA, 34 million, Auckland Council, 25, and our trust could probably raise 5 odd million. At the moment, it's not committed in the LTP. Interestingly enough, your LTP has got a statement, this is a priority project, but no funding whatsoever for it. So somewhere we missed there, joining the dots there. Cost benefit modelling, so this is 2015 figures, so we're just going to get these updated. The benefit cost ratio is 2.4, demand 340,000 cyclists, approximately nearly 200 cyclists from the Te Ara to in will use the benefit of, and quite obviously because of the connection to the Northwest Cycleway. Travel time savings 2.4. The health benefits are the major benefit, which in itself is a bit of a barrier with transport agencies, because the transport agencies are looking at travel benefits, so we try to promote a more holistic approach. Safety benefits 2.1 million and vehicle operating costs 6 million. So our current work program at the moment, the resource consent has just been lodged. It's gone through the council process. We expect it to be publicly notified in July. There's a construction of a pathway from Camonda to Riceville Reserve. So that's funded. That hopefully will be finished towards the end of this year. We're planning for the first stage of a pathway from Riceville Reserve to Olympic Park and requested funding from council towards this project. We think this is actually probably the best benefit, immediate benefit for the project, in that it provides a totally off-road link from Newland to Avondale, probably saving about nearly 1.5 kilometres in travel for cyclists. We have a planting program planned to kick off as part of Arbor Day right through to September. We've started an environmental education plan, working with council partners and the schools. We have some public information days planned for June, which are really focused around the resource consent application. And we started the scoping for environmental restoration plan for the Far River catchment, which is, we think this is a new concept in New Zealand. It hasn't really been done in the sense that, here we go. So what is the action plan? Well, firstly, it's a way of integrating conservation planning and infrastructure. It provides the foundation for a catchment approach based on ecosystems with quite emphasis on conservation and consultation. And it's geared towards delivering the greatest benefits for aquatic resource restoration and species and landscape. And quite interestingly, following on our previous presenters, the concept, traditionally we've tended to look at catchments just as water and looked at land, but this actually almost the other way around. If we look after the land and we look after the plants and the trees, the water will look after itself. So it's that subtle change. Obviously, it's important to take into account the water infrastructure. So the benefits is, firstly, it's a single plan. So it does look at water quality, quantity, the flooding that happened there in the catchment 2 years ago, biodiversity and map priority locations, better avoidance and minimisation of impact, so a lot of emphasis on the front end. And in particular, this catchment is very challenging because of the growth pressure. So on one hand, there's pressure to cut down trees to provide for growth. And on the other hand, we want to try and protect what few trees are left. It's a way of providing for the stakeholders to work together and better consideration of the landscape level insights, goals, catchment goals, restoration, recovery priorities for results, and possibility for effective action. And the idea is, while the plan is being developed, is to actually get on and do some projects. So as an example, there's opportunities to provide bioswales in Archibald Park, which will provide not only cleaning up the stormwater, but also an education component. There's an opportunity to look at some riparian restoration and stream restoration daylighting to help mitigate the flooding effects. So one of the benefits is that conservation investments can occur sooner rather than later. So one of the first steps is to actually develop an integrated database and look at where things are happening, where there's funding, and see how we can bring all those together. Better site identification. So the principle there is to actually end up with a GIS map for the whole catchment, and residents can then click on their property, can see what they could be doing on their property to restore the catchment, as well as providing all the relevant information. And funding can be planned and integrated for the environmental improvements. So what are the processes? Very, very strong in building and strengthening relationships. And in a project like this, there's very good examples in the United States, and typically you find that you might spend, if the project takes 2 years, you might spend 1.5 years building the relationships, because it's really important. If you don't get the relationships right, you can't really implement the program. The next step is to create an ecosystem framework for the Far River catchment. And the reason why the Far Pathway is interested in the catchment is because the pathway is actually a corridor within the catchment, so it actually provides an green network, if you like, for the catchment. Define the scenarios for the assessment, then create an ecosystem framework, an infrastructure development framework. And a lot of this work council's really doing in some ways. For example, you've got Healthy Waters doing quite a lot of water quality monitoring. You've got Biodiversity doing stock take. Then the next step is to prioritise the ecological actions, develop creating strategy. This is controversial, but this is the possibility of looking at environmental offsets. So in a catchment like this, it's not possible to be pure. It's already highly modified. So, we'll have to look at perhaps it's an offset maybe downstream. And I think Council's done some work on environmental offsets, but I'm not sure where that's got to. The next step is develop consultation program and the implementation. So you see, before you actually start doing anything, you actually have to complete those 7 steps before you actually rush into any actual detailed program. That doesn't stop progress being made. And the next one is the feedback loop, which is to update the ecosystem framework, the scenarios and regional assessment. So very briefly, I'll probably give you a lot of information in a brief period of time. It's just to introduce the concepts. I do want to again thank Council for all the support we've had to date. Also the various foundations that have supported us, and the Council staff who without this project wouldn't be able to be possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Di or Gilbert, anything to add, or are you happy to take questions at this stage? Okay. All right. Sorry. Councillor Casey.
Yep, I've always been supportive of this and continue to be so. I'm just interested in your modelling figures for cycling and pedestrian, and whether you've updated that with regards to the Waterview Shared Path, which is, as you know, a huge success. And the word commute rung a bell for me, but just that, do you still stand by the figures you produced today, or do you think that you need to do more work?
Yes, thank you for the question. We definitely need to do some more work, because the modelling was based on the 2013 census, so it's quite out of date. There's been a lot of growth in Newland, and also we want to look at the impact of the cycleways. And I think what the modelling didn't do also, it was very confined just to the pathway itself. We need to look at the whole network, the whole Western network. So we actually can take off that work on Friday, actually.
I think this will be the best thing to happen to the full bar none.
Thank you, Councillor Casey. I absolutely agree, and I hope councillors are listening to this, even though it might not be in your area. If you think about how council needs to do its business into the future, it's about integrating meaningful and important infrastructure like cycle and walkways together with cleaning up the environment around it. And this is, we're not doing anything like this in the Auckland region. This is an extraordinary piece of work. And I don't know whether it's appropriate, but I want to acknowledge Craig McElroy, who's here. And Healthy Waters have grabbed the opportunity to do monitoring and work within, as a subset of this large piece of work. And they're already sourcing some of the problems that we've got within our faux catchment, tracking them back on land, and doing the work to fix the problems with various exacerbators of bad water quality. In other words, businesses that need a little bit of a clean-up, who've happily done a clean-up, and the faux is in better condition as a result. So I do hope that people understand the enormity of this project, and thank you, Councillor Casey, for pointing that out. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. If we listen to Genevieve Ford earlier, this is actually an expression of a lot of the things she asked us to do. So I guess my question is why don't you think, even though we've got it in our long-term plan as a priority, but there's no money next to it, what do you think the barriers might be here? In terms, because the numbers are big and scary, but the outcomes are extraordinary. So what do you think it is that might be the stumbling block here for us to actually get some money into the columns?
Through the Chair, well, I can't speak for council processes, but I think one of the issues we're challenging with is that the cost-benefit model is very narrow. So it doesn't look, if we go to Auckland Transport, they will only look at the transport benefits. But in terms of social and cultural and health and environmental benefits, I think we need to do some more work on that to make a convincing business case.
Do you think that's how we should be looking at it? Because we do have the ability to look at social and environmental outcomes as well. I mean, I think that's, if we're just looking at AT, I think it maybe is that where the way we need to be looking at it, rather than what does AT say? What are the outcomes we have in a myriad of different plans? Physical activation, public transport activation, active transport, water quality, because it's very much about water quality as well. Maybe that's it. Now, the other question I had was, and I'll leave it.
Right, and Councillor Clow, you're wanting to move this, and you've got a question.
I just as part answer to Councillor Cooper's question, we know that NZTA is really a big stumbling block. What are you doing to lobby ministers, including Mr Twyford, but NZTA, to try and reassess their criteria for supporting these sorts of active transportation routes that don't align with main highways, because that seems to be where that's their criteria at the moment. It seems to be aligning, it has to be close to a main highway or along, but there's no linkages allowed. Are you doing work to try and get NZTA to see the light? Because it's not just this project, there's many projects around the country.
Yes, through the Chair, that's a priority for us. We would like to update the cost-benefit basis first, so we've got a more compelling case, but hopefully by about the end of June we'll have the work completed and we'll start the advocacy component. Interestingly enough, one of the comments we've had from people is that with the carry dieback and tracks being close in the Watakari ranges, there's actually limited opportunities for walking and cycling out west, so this project would actually help to offset that effect.
And final question, Councillor Newman.
Thank you and good morning. I mean, listening carefully to what Ross just said, and I agree with him around NZTA's narrow interpretation of what it should be doing, but have you, because I really see merit in this, and have you looked at the Southern Corridor improvements in South Auckland, where that it's a $268 million project to widen the Southern Motorway, but actually around about 8% of the capital cost is being spent on active walking and cycling through a cycleway which is not connected to the Southern Motorway but adjacent to it, resplendent with its own cycling overbridges at Karaka into Papakura. I mean, I see that there is plenty of synergy there between that sort of project and this sort of project. But I wonder if NZTA is deliberately choosing not to look at what it's doing elsewhere in order to try and resist its calls for this type of investment. Are you aware of those other projects where NZTA are fronting up with very, very significant funding? Because that's over $20 million that they're having to put into that piece of active cycling and walking infrastructure.
So, Chair, no, I'm not aware of them, but we'll follow the lead because this definitely. I mean, one of the suggestions we've had is that perhaps in the future, with the widening of the next stage of State Highway 16, it may be possible to leverage of that, but we'll certainly follow that suggestion. Thank you.
I mean, Chair, I think as a piece of analysis for this particular, the Te Whau pathway, that southern corridor investment, I mean, that's a 4.5 kilometre shared use pedestrian cycle path for about $24 million. It's an extraordinary amount of money to spend. I'm pleased that it's happening, but to be honest, I would have thought that this sort of project would be far easier than the Southern Motorway project, and therefore there shouldn't be a problem in NZTA helping it. And given that there is no link between that shared use pedestrian cycle path and the Southern Motorway, because you wouldn't want that, I don't see why the argument couldn't be applied here as well. I think there's plenty of scope if there can be some advice prepared by Council and Auckland Transport to have that argument with NZTA, understanding that there are all sorts of problems with that business case work that NZTA is requiring. There should really be no difference between the two projects. They should be helping this. So if some advice could be got, I'd be very keen to see that and to support it.
Thank you.
It's a really wise suggestion, thank you. Okay, so Councillor Clow will move and Councillor Casey will second that we receive and thank our presenters. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And I think that was an excellent suggestion of Councillor Newman's. Please go in hope. And thank you for the awesome work on this and the work that's happening right now as we speak. Thank you.